Here's a story that kind of flew under the radar a little bit, but I wanted to highlight for you guys because I think this is a giant bombshell. So this is reported in Responsible Statecraft. Trump effectively sold Sheldon Adelson the sensitive foreign policy decision to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem in exchange for a $20 million super PAC donation, reports Maggie Haberman of the New York Times. 58 Palestinians were killed and 2,700 were injured in the aftermath. So, I don't know how many of you guys remember this, but when Trump did this, it was huge news internationally. And, you know, basically every country was like, what the fuck are you doing? You are inflaming tensions for no reason whatsoever. And, well, now we know why Trump did it. So, here's what they say. Trump tell-all cites Adelson bankrolled Israel embassy move. Another confidence man emerges from New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman's new book. Sheldon Adelson, the Republican Party's biggest funder over the past decade, used a $20 million donation to a super PAC to pressure then-President Donald Trump to adopt the highly controversial decision to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That quid pro quo is described in New York Times journalist Maggie Haberman's new book, Confidence Man, The Making of Donald Trump and the Breaking of America. Adelson's singular focus was Israel, wrote Haberman, effectively acknowledging that the former president's biggest funder was interested in promoting the interests of a foreign country. In Trump, he saw a chance at enacting change in American policy toward Israel and gave $20 million to a super PAC working to elect him, wrote Haberman. As a candidate, Trump promised that he would open an embassy in Jerusalem fairly quickly, and after his victory, Adelson pushed him to act on it. Over meetings during the transition and first year of the administration, Adelson pressured Trump that the nightmare scenarios that he would be warned about in briefings as a possibility following such a move were overblown. So Adelson tells him, look, do this. It's all going to work out. It's not even a big deal. This is where the embassy should be anyway. And we all know how that worked out. Haberman goes on to detail how Trump appointed his bankruptcy lawyer, David Friedman, as ambassador to Israel and worked with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to shift the U.S. approach to the region. He and Kushner, ignoring concerns about treating Palestinians as if they were on equal footing with Israel in pursuing peace, pushed through a string of measures such as slashing financial aid to Palestinians, forcing the Palestine Liberation Organization from its Washington offices, and the embassy relocation, she wrote. Recognition of the role played by Adelson's campaign contribution apparently went all the way to the top of the Israeli government, according to Haberman, who reports a confidant to Israel's prime minister credited David Friedman's brains, Sheldon Adelson's money, and Trump's balls for the embassy move. The relocation resulted in protests where 58 Palestinians were killed and 2,700 injured. While a highly controversial decision that calls into question the U.S. commitment to a two-state solution with Jerusalem as the shared capital of Israel and a future Palestinian state, the Biden administration declined to reverse the policy shift allegedly made possible by Adelson's $20 million contribution to a pro-Trump super PAC. Last year, the Democratic-controlled Senate voted 97-3 in favor of an amendment supporting the embassy relocation. Look, nobody's going to tell you this, but it's true. That is the impact of the Israel lobby. That's the impact of the Israel lobby. They give a tremendous amount of money to both parties, and they're able to buy their bidding. And now we know, and look, this perfectly describes how it would happen under Trump. It's crass, it's transactional, and it's not like he did this because of any ideological or philosophical commitments. He did it simply for the money. He did it to prop up the Republican Party and deliver for his donors. So in a sense, the guy who argued on the debate stage in 2016, hey, everybody else is beholden to the donors. I'm not. I'm independently wealthy. I don't need their money. This is the guy who was the most corrupt and the most transactional. And he was willing to play the game just like anybody else, except he played it more brazenly. So you have a billionaire buying a particular foreign policy move. And look, that sort of rips the mask off of how the system works, doesn't it? That should never be a thing, period. Like, that should never happen ever. And what do we get when that is the case? Well, you don't just get a move like this. You could argue one of the reasons why we continue these wars in the Middle East is because it is very profitable for the military-industrial complex. It is very profitable for Boeing and Honeywell and formerly Halliburton, who paid Dick Cheney, and then Dick Cheney gives them no-bid contracts when he was vice president. No foreign policy decisions, no political decisions, period, domestically or otherwise, should be made this way. Ever. And then, the American public is like, not even a consideration. And certainly, the Palestinians weren't a consideration in the slightest. Sheldon Adelson died early last year, but not before he and his wife, Miriam Adelson, flaunted their influence by ferrying Jonathan Pollard, a former U.S. Navy analyst who spent 30 years in prison after pleading guilty to spying for Israel, out of the country and to a hero's welcome in Israel on one of the Adelson's private 737s after Pollard's travel ban was lifted. Miriam, who holds both U.S. and Israeli citizenship and is worth $27 billion, continues to loom large as a potential GOP megafunder in the midterms and beyond. But she's largely held back thus far from the level of political giving she engaged in alongside her husband. Whether or not she chooses to reemerge as a bankroller of the Republican Party and potentially a shaper of the party's foreign policy in the Middle East, she enjoys souvenirs from the influence she and her husband appear to have held over the Trump administration on sensitive U.S. foreign policy decisions. So now they're saying, look at how grotesque the system is. A billionaire megadonor controlled U.S. foreign policy, and now the wife of the former billionaire megadonor, if she wants to, can get involved and start buying foreign policy decisions as well. You cannot fault anybody for saying the U.S. is an oligarchy, because look at how it functions. Just look at how it functions. And by the way, again, I haven't heard anybody else talk about this. Credit to Responsible Statecraft for this amazing work. They're also the ones who showed us recently that there's a $94 million donation that went from Saudi Arabia to the Republican Party. They're effectively buying influence throughout the entire Republican Party. They're betting now all in on the Republican Party, where they used to sort of split it between Democrats and Republicans. They told us that got very little coverage, if any coverage at all. And this is like, following the money is the main thing that would give you an understanding of how our politics works. And now we see how it functions in a crass transactional way. And this guy had the nerve to run on Make America Great Again and drain the swamp. Dude, you are the swamp. And not only are you not making America great again, you weren't even thinking about America in the slightest. You were thinking about increasing donations to your coffers. Astonishing, man. This is astonishing. And just like all the other stories that show Trump as what he really is, all of his sycophants will completely ignore it. I can guarantee you that. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.